Sir Nicholas Hytner is the most acclaimed theatre director of his generation. A former artistic director of the National Theatre. Here in London, he became famous with his productions of The Madness of King George, The History Boys, many, many others. And now in London, an absolutely five-star revival of Guys and Dolls. His latest production is a brand new play called Giant by Mark Rosenblatt, starring John Lithgow, which is on at the Royal Court Theatre. Nick, welcome back to Unholy.
I'm very happy to be with you.
You know, we are especially happy because a confession is that the words Nick Hytner have become a kind of shorthand between me and Yonid to refer to the era before October 7th, when we were able to talk about other things on this podcast, because we had you on to talk about Guys and Dolls and the Jewishness of the Broadway musical, and it just feels like a different and much more innocent era last time we all sat together and talked.
I think about that often. It was such an enjoyable conversation. And we were talking about exactly the things that Jews like to talk about when they get together, particularly showbiz Jews. And it does tragically feel like another era. I wish we could talk about Broadway musicals again, but the play, at least, which you're going to talk about, feels like it's connected to the current terrible moment.
I mean, so much. So it's set 40 years ago. It turns out to be uncannily timely. I mean, to the day. Why don't you set out for us what the play is and does, and why it is in a way so timely now?
So this play was written by Mark Rosenblatt, a very good director here in the UK, who suggested this to me as an idea that somebody else should write. But his pitch was so complete, so detailed, and so eloquent that I suggested to him that he should try writing it himself. He'd never written a play before, and his gift for dialogue, structure, and characterization was something he didn't even know he had. The play, as he pitched it, is the play he wrote. It's about Roald Dahl, the children's author, who is the giant of the title. Roald Dahl was famously, monstrously anti-Semitic. He described himself as anti-Semitic. The play finds him a week or so after he published a book review in the Literary Review of a book called God Cried about the siege of Beirut. He in the early 80s, in 1982. The play takes place across a summer afternoon in 1983. His publisher, British Jewish publisher Tom Maschler, has arrived to try to deal with the fallout from this anti-Semitic book review. It's textbook racist. He begins by attacking the actions of the Israeli government in Beirut. And he swiftly goes on to say things like, and I think I'm quoting more or less verbatim here, never before has a race of people in the space of a lifetime gone from being much pitied victims to barbarous murderers. And he uses race of people twice. There is no more objectively racist thing to say than that. His publisher arrives. The play is fictional. Roald Dahl is real. His fiancée, Felicity Crossland, is real. And his publisher, Tom Maschler, is real. There's no record that an afternoon like this might have happened, although it is fact that that there were attempts to make him explain or retract some of the things he wrote in the book review. In the play, Maschler arrives, and he's swiftly followed by a fictional character from Dahl's American publisher called Jesse Stone, who is Jewish. And they try, over the course of the play, to get him to see that what he wrote was unacceptable, to get him to deal with it. There was a fuss, in reality, when Dahl published his book review. To be honest, people have asked me in the week since the play opened, so what happened to Roald Dahl after he published this this terrible thing? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happened to him. Nothing at all. There was a fuss. It died away. He not only didn't retract or apologize, shortly afterwards, he volunteered in an interview with the New Statesman remarks that were even more heinous, including the most awful thing of many that he said was that even a stinker like there's a reason why anti-anything crops up anywhere, said Dahl verbatim. Even a stinker like Hitler didn't just pick on them for no reason. So that was his response to the attempt to get him to retract. The play tries to imagine how he got from bad to worse, and it is entirely Mark's work. I encouraged him to write it. I thought that I could produce it at my own theatre, the Bridge Theatre, but it's a fierce, tight play, better suited to a smaller auditorium than mine. And when the new director, the brand new director of the Royal Court Theatre, David Byrne, in the course of chatting to me about running theatres, mentioned that he was looking for stuff to stage, I suggested the play to him. So it ends up on the stage of the Royal Court, which is the right stage and the right auditorium for this play. And it explores, apart from a nuanced account of Dahl's own racism, it explores two contrasting types of Jewishness: the Jewishness of the young Jewish American publisher, and the Jewishness of Tom Maschler, a Holocaust refugee. He escaped with his family in the 30s from, I think, Berlin, and is entirely assimilated, and not in the course of the play. He changes, but at the beginning of the play, not that interested in his own Jewishness. That's the setup for the play.
I mean, what's amazing, there's so much to say about this, and I think we should go into Dahl's anti-Semitism, why it's never actually been reckoned. There's never been a reckoning about that, really. As you said, this whole thing was a fuss, and then it blew over. He's still a beloved children's author. But I'm wondering, reading this as an Israeli after this year, and you can't, Jonathan used the word uncanny. It's not only the issue of Lebanon resurfacing, but it's all of that discussion of, can you be anti-Israeli, and does that mean that you necessarily hate Jews? And in his case, that was both. But all of that discussion about the Israeli decisions, how it affects, Jews around the world, how it is all so present here in our lives. And I was thinking of you after, seeing Guys and Dolls and reading this play and saying, this is not exactly escapism for you. This is very much, diving into these dark waters of the past year in many ways, even though it's a story from the 80s, right?
Yeah. And it was written 2-3 years ago. It was written over lockdown. So it was not written in response to the last 12 months. It's distressing how the events that prompt the events of the play. It's distressing how the play itself feels like part of a history that repeats itself. It's to the credit of the Royal Court and everybody involved that a play that was actually planned before the Hamas atrocity has been presented when planned and exactly as planned. And it's a play that has a really sobering effect. A lot of it is funny. A lot of it, the audience laughs a lot. It's a kind of grim laughter in the face of catastrophe. But it's a play that appalls and grips, and I'm assuming plays to an audience with widely divergent views on the conflict that we're currently in the middle of. There's a significant portion of the audience is Jewish, and I would imagine that a significant portion of the audience are, I would imagine, fully engaged with the current fashionable metropolitan left-wing critique of Israel. And both respond to the play, perhaps because Dahl's anti-Semitism is so clear. Perhaps it enables people to think about the difference between specific criticism of specific actions undertaken by a specific Israeli government and hatred of Jews. Having said that, the play has been extremely well received. Somewhat to our surprise, but it's been universally well received in the press. But even in what's essentially an entirely sympathetic press, you pick up odd things that, as a Jew, rather take you aback. One very sympathetic review account of the play described Dahl's initial book review as something that was deemed by some to be anti-Semitic. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that that the writer of that piece was sympathetic to the play and sympathetic to its arguments, but was, I don't know, by reflex being painfully even-handed. No idea, but it is as I said, a piece which describes the culpability and the hatefulness of a race of people. I don't know what is more objectively racist than that.
Yes, I know the piece you mean. I'm interested. There's so much good in this play, and I'm actually read it twice, but I haven't yet seen it. I'm looking forward to seeing it in a week, 10 days or so. One thing that I wondered about was that he is shown as, yes, very irascible, but also, and this is part of absolutely what you'd expect of a high quality play, also very human, very kind of likable, because he's funny and he has these quite tender moments. But without giving anything away in the story, the Jewish characters in the play do behave quite badly. They do something quite bad that turns on dishonesty. And I did wonder if you have any worry that people might come away from it thinking, well, he had a point.
No, I don't really. I think when you see it, the dishonesty is a minor stratagem to deal with a monstrous narcissist. And that's one of the things that the play's about. The play isn't just about Dahl's anti-Semitism. The play is about how the people in the orbit of a narcissistic, creative giant have to deal with day by day, have to deal with his unpredictability and his egotism. And there's the two publishers engage in a very kind of the kind of tactical nonsense that you have to deal with when you're tiptoeing around one of these. I mean, weirdly, Donald Trump was a bit of a touchstone when we were discussing this man in rehearsal. You see it now, in a big way on the world stage. People tiptoeing around this crazy narcissist. So I think that's not an issue, honestly, Jonathan. I think more interesting really is the emollients of the British Jewish character, Tom Mashler, his determination to deflect Dahl's racism, Dahl's anti-Semitism, and what in the end becomes too much for him. And again, I don't want to give anything away, but I think he's a figure that a lot of the Jewish members of the audience recognize, and the response you'll see is not unsympathetic to him. It's not. It's they get it. More alien to a British Jewish audience in some ways is the convinced, passionate, apparently unyielding support of Israel. Even in the face of, although Sabra and Shatila never mentioned, because Mark decided, it's ancient history, there'll be too many people who don't know what those words mean, obviously never expecting that Lebanon would become part of the conversation again the very week the play opened. But even in the face of Sabra and Shatila, there's a particular kind of American Jew who is going to be unyielding in their support of the Israeli state. As I say, the play is an extraordinarily subtle examination, not just of a narcissist and an anti-Semite, but of two distinct ways of being Jewish but not Israeli.
Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting. In Tom's character, there's this line where he says, if someone thinks I tacitly approve of his childish views on Israel because I didn't speak out against them, I'll take it. And, you know, the fact that he is at the beginning, he's quiet and he changes as the play goes forward. I do want to ask you something that I kind of found interesting, and that is in the character of Jesse, who is, as you said, the American Jew who's very kind of fervently defending Israel and calling him an anti-Semite, even though that can get her fired, right? She clearly does this. And at the end, I mean, it starts when she wants to, she asks to have him autograph a book for her son. And in the end, he asks her if she still wants the autograph, even though she's called him an anti-Semite. And she says this answer that I love. She said, I don't know if everything you are, the books are too. And that has always bothered me, how to deal with someone who's so clearly an anti-Semite. I mean, in my family growing up, my parents, for them, William Shakespeare was another figure in the family. But we always skipped over The Merchant of Venice, right? No one ever asked me to read that. It was like, forget it. No, that's not a good play. We read the rest. The question is how can you enjoy, his books? Can you enjoy anything else that is, he's an anti-Semite? Can you continue reading it? Can your children continue to read it?
The play touches on this more than once and with real insight. The best I can do is to say that great art has never necessarily been the product of great people, noble minds, moral uprightness. In some ways, in the list of great artists who are monstrous human beings is very long indeed. The two might even be connected. It might take a capacity to transgress moral boundaries. It might take to produce a certain type of great art, and I think it is possible to separate the two. It took Israeli audiences decades. It took Daniel Barenboim to persuade Israeli audiences to listen to the music of Wagner. There's a difference between Wagner and Shakespeare. Shakespeare was reflecting an anti-Semitism that was inherent to the age he lived in and the place he lived in. And given that, the play is an anti-Semitic play, but it is sympathetic quite often to the Jew. Wagner was monstrously anti-Semitic. His music is for some people, is for some Jews, irreplaceable. They can't live without it. That part of Wagner that produced the music, I suppose you have to separate from the man who hated Jews. There are great artists who were murderers. There are great artists who abused women. What I think is useful is to complicate the response to great art. I think you can be swept away by Wagner, but you can be swept away by, another incredibly problematic composer, Richard Strauss, who was the Nazis' court composer, probably through laziness more than conviction. You can adore that music, but I think you can't avoid who these people were. It's a necessary complication. If this play complicates the response to Roald Dahl, that to me would be a useful achievement. There's a show running in the West End, a wonderful show about Michael Jackson. The songs are good enough, the music is great enough for the audience to deal with the accusations against Michael Jackson. Those who love Roald Dahl's stories, they include the playwright Mark Rosenblatt, who reads them to his kids. I think they'll go on loving the stories. In the play Tom Maschler, the context for the line you read, Yonit, is a defense as his publisher of the good that his books do. And they do good, despite his self-evidently monstrous flaws as a human being. The two can coexist, I guess.
And not just coexist. I'm really taken by what you said before about the connection between the monstrosity of the person and the scale of the genius sometimes. Just in this particular case with Roald Dahl, the cruelty that he exhibits towards Jews is there in the books, the cruelty.
Yeah, it is.
The sadism and cruelty and the transgressive nature of it. That's partly why kids love those books, because there is a kind of sadism in there, sometimes playful, but there is a cruel streak. So I see the connection. I wanted just to go slightly broader than him and just about the arts generally, because you made the point about the presumption of a sort of liberal, metropolitan, elite audience. The sense people who are sort of not professionally in the arts is that I'm guessing they will assume that right now it's all but impossible for Israel to get a kind of hearing in that world, the sense that there will be pretty close to universal hostility based on the last 12 months. I'd be interested to know, first of all, if you think that's right, and then secondly, if that makes being a Jew in the arts, with all the complicated, multiple attitudes to Israel and the complications that you use, to use that word, does it make it quite hard?
Well, two parts of your question. I am surprised and honestly delighted that at the end of the first half of this play, and again, give nothing away, it's a full-throated, passionate defense of Israel and a passionate attack on Dahl's assumptions. And it builds and builds. And the first, it exposes Dahl for who he is to his face. The young American publisher has a long and passionate speech, which is cheered, and it cannot just be that it's Jewish members of the audience cheering her. I think the play is so good, Mark Rosenblatt's achievement is so undeniable that members of the audience who are neutral or members of the audience who are distressed, don't know where to put themselves, acknowledge, as all grown-ups must, that the situation, I think it was a piece that you wrote, Jonathan, that described it as a tragic conflict of conflicting rights. You were more eloquent than that.
I was quoting Amos Oz, who says it's a clash of right versus right.
Yeah,
and that's the tragedy of it.
I think we all know. You know, I know. People on both the left and the right, but recently predominantly on the left, who don't even accept that. It's impossible to get a fair hearing from them. They're possessed and obsessed. But I do think that what the play says is that there's an audience that comes to the Royal Court engaged theatrical Londoners who are relieved and delighted to hear the full-throated defence. That's the good thing. The second thing is you ask, by the way, while still acknowledging the complexity, you ask, is it difficult to be a Jew in the arts? I can only answer you honestly. I've spoken to young Jews in the theatre who do find it really difficult. Honestly, of course I don't find it difficult. Because of where I am in the theatre, nobody brings it to me personally, because I'm going to say, they know who I am, they know I'm Jewish, and that is not to underplay how hard it is to be a young Jewish theatre worker surrounded by people who want to give them hell. It's really not easy.
It was probably not an easy year for you either. Everything that has been going on in the past year with all of your, can you talk to us a little bit about how that year has been for you?
It's been an easier year than the year you've had. We're in London. We're in London. We're protected, and we live in comparison to Israelis, a very, very easy life. There is, if I'm going to be brutally honest, an element of Tom Mashler in me. There are circumstances where I just think, if confronted with falsity and injustice, I will happily go there. But otherwise, the situation seeming to me, I'm glad it's Amos Oz's analysis of it, to involve tragically conflicting rights. Sometimes it's just not worth going there. I'm going to be absolutely honest. Look, one of the things that Jesse Stone in the play throws at Roald Dahl is that nowhere in his book review does he mention that Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982 in self-defense. I'm going to say this happens over and over. For any reasonably aware London Jew, British Jew, you read the accounts in sympathetic papers otherwise of Israeli actions, you had to look really hard. Am I being unfair, Jonathan? To be reminded that Hezbollah have been firing rockets into Israel for years. History is repeating itself. The action in Lebanon, however complex, however much you might be, as a Jew, confused, distressed by it, it does involve a large element of response to aggression by Hezbollah. You have to look for that really hard. So the play is distressingly alive. And yeah, that's speaking personally, I find it really hard. But as I say, you must have spent last night in shelters. We had it easy.
I told you at the start of our conversation that Yoni and I use Nick Hytner as a shorthand for finding joy in life and not just obsessing about the Middle East. And you've become that shorthand. So I'm going to Nick Hytner this interview by asking you to talk about something else, which is Guys and Dolls is still a smash hit here. It is still playing at the Bridge Theatre, your theatre, the one you founded. Anyone who hasn't seen it, it is an extraordinary production because it involves the audience becoming part of the living, breathing New York City of Damon Runyon's New York, and you're in among the actors and so on. Is this production going to go around the world? You have also, will people in other cities get to see it? And also you have, some people will know you from your film work. People who aren't lucky enough to go to theatre will know some of the movies you've directed. And I wonder, because this is a dispute for nerds here, but some of us don't necessarily think the original Guys and Dolls movie is all that great compared to the stage production. And therefore, might there be room for a Nick Hytner directed new Guys and Dolls movie?
It's going to be really hard. We're trying. It's going to be really hard to do Guys and Dolls elsewhere because it is so... It's so specific to what the Bridge Theatre in the round promenade format is capable of doing. There'd be no point in putting that production behind a proscenium arch. We have been trying for 2 years to get that format replicated elsewhere, so far without success. There's certainly room for a new movie, but I think having got so immersed in it in its theatrical form, and the production at the Bridge Theatre is so much about the interplay between the audience and the action that I think putting it in front of a camera would be impossible for me. Absolutely impossible. I will take half a minute to plug, to say that I did shoot a movie this summer. A new script by my longtime collaborator Alan Bennett, in about a choral society in Yorkshire in 1916, dealing with obviously a shortage of men and the chorus master who have all joined up. And the connection with Giant is that towards the end of the movie, they sing Elgar all the way through. They can't sing German music, so they sing Elgar. Elgar turns up. So Elgar, my God, he's no Roald Dahl. He's no Wagner. But he's this writer of great music, to which all English people have a profound connection. He's petty, he's vain, he's tricky, he's, in his old age, hugely inappropriate with women. Again, there is a vast gap between him and his art. But this I will say about Elgar, and this I realized when I discovered this, that it's something about being a Jew in this country which you get used to. He was enormously fond and admiring of his Jewish friends and colleagues, and he lived long enough. He was also obsessed with German music and loved Germany, and he lived long enough to be vocally distressed in his very old age by the rise of the Nazis, because he was so attached to the Jews that he worked with. And I remember when I read this thinking, oh my God, good for Elgar, that's amazing. And the truth is that, you know, particularly you come across a famous Englishman from the beginning of the 20th century who is actively engaged with and actively likes Jews, and you think, wow, that's something. That's an exception. That's just something you get used to. So, vain but philo-Semitic is what we can say about the English composer Edward Elgar.
I mean, look, this whole conversation reminded me of something that Martha Gellhorn, who was a war correspondent and Hemingway's third wife, said about him when she separated from him. She said, a man has to be a great genius to cover up for being such a loathsome human being. So that probably explains Roald Dahl, for example. But you're definitely a great genius and a wonderful human being. And we were so glad to have you on again. We're warning you that it might happen the third time, so just be prepared.
I so enjoyed talking to you. I'm thrilled to be on, and Shana Tova to both of you.
Shana Tova, Nick Hytner, thanks so much for coming on Unholy.
Thank you.
It is such a joy to have him on. There's no wonder why it became this kind of happy place for you and me, remembering having him on. But he's also was really willing to go into some of the issues. I mean, I thought that was very important what he said, that, okay, if there is anti-Semitism and discomfort for Jews in the theatre, I'm not going to feel it because I'm in this very, vaunted position. But other people in this business are definitely feeling it.
Yeah, and a lot about the sort of silent majority on Israel, not only what he said about the crowd that actually wants to hear that monologue that, that does give Israel a lot of support and kind of sets the Israeli case quite clearly, but also what he said about his thinking and how he feels in certain areas where he feels like he is being silent for certain reasons, or the areas where he isn't. I mean, it was such an interesting thing to hear, and he is so great. I mean, it's so such a pleasure to have him on each time. It's been a year and a few months, so it's a different world, and we're all different. But that is constant. That having Sir Nick Hytner on is always a pleasure.
It really is. I think Giant is obviously already a smash hit. I think it will get transferred, and I think it will go all over. It will be on Broadway and elsewhere. But you heard about it here first.